Hi, I'm Ryan Davis,
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
and this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Is this seat taken?
Hey, Kiernan.
Did you hear how I did a little something different?
Yeah, you sort of played off what I usually do with my sort of vocal
Exercises.
performance.
Yeah,
Exercises.
I mean,
Yeah.
before we start each episode, you do about 45 minutes to an hour and a half of vocal warm-ups.
Well, I do because I'm classically trained, so it's really important for
what?
me to. Just in general, it's a general kind of classical education, and so I want to make sure that my voice is not injured during these brutal. People don't know we record for 4 hours. Each episode
4
takes
hours
us
and we get them down to a tight hour 10. No, today I'm feeling a tight episode today. I'm feeling like maybe a 40-minute episode. We're going to see.
Ooh.
Because we went a little long on the Thomas John Glass interview. I thought it was so interesting. Had to keep in a lot of the meat.
Yeah, I mean, but that's he's a charming man. We don't have any charming men joining us.
Yeah,
there are no charming men on this podcast.
If one of us had a French accent, maybe we could keep listeners for longer than 40 minutes. But today we're definitely going to keep listeners because the topic at hand is so fascinating. Today we're going to talk about when a city or a place has like industrial infrastructure. So maybe there's a factory or there's like piping. And when they take something like an industrial eyesore and they reinvent it into a park in a city.
Not like a brewery, because that's also a thing people do.
No, we're not going to cover like factories to hotels or like buildings into lofts, even though like that's certainly all happening. This is specifically about how you take what could be just kind of this rusted metal shell and turn it into a place that people actually want to go.
Yeah, okay. In this obviously, as a New Yorker, Mayor Bloomberg introduced me to this idea, right?
Absolutely. Sorry, Mayor Bloomberg, do you want to genuflect?
You didn't see me? I did.
No.
I did genuflect.
Sorry, yeah. And now, what do you do if I say De Blasio? Oh, wow, you just spit right on the camera.
Oh my
Jeez.
God.
Oh,
De Blasio's tried to shut down all these parks. He's like,
well, but Ryan, it's funny that I already jumped to genuflecting because I do want to cover just a piece of personal business between you and me that the audience can share on. I want to praise something that a loyal listener and a wonderful woman sent to my new son, Charlie. He got a gift in the mail. Totally unexpected, just so incredibly thoughtful. Do you know what I'm talking about, Ryan?
I think I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So, your mother,
Yes.
Judy.
Hi,
Judy.
Friend of the show, friend of the pod.
Sent Charlie just this gift was so great, so spot on, so perfect for this little guy that I was gonna save it for the last stop. But I just thought, nope. You know what? We know, 80% of our listeners stop listening after the first 8 minutes. So we don't actually know that, folks. That I thought it deserves a spot here at the top of the show. Do you know what your mom sent, Charlie?
I do. She sent me a picture before she mailed them to you. Yeah. She sent these beautiful Catholic socks.
Catholic socks. Now you might be wondering what makes a Catholic sock. What makes a sock Catholic?
I would say like a very graphic image of the crucifixion.
So
not appropriate for a child.
There
Mom,
is
by
a
the
cross involved. So they're these cute little white, very angelic looking, made for baby feet. And they've got just beautifully sewn golden crosses on them. And I believe she got them at a Catholic store while she was traveling in Texas.
Yeah, she got them in Texas. So they are Texas baby Catholic socks.
But they definitely came from a Catholic store, right? This isn't from like some mega church.
No, I don't think she would send your baby a Protestant gift. She knows better.
Well, listen. The reason I thought this could fit as a last stop because it is definitely the perfect the perfect baby wear for his first trip to the Vatican. Yeah. And if we don't get him there while his feet are this small, maybe he could just wear them on his big toe, or he could use them as kind of ear warmers. But these, I'm definitely going to post them to the Instagram at OOO Podcast. That's at OO Podcast. And I just want to dearly thank Judy for the Catholic socks. Little Charlie has put a written thank you note in the mail. He's a prodigy. I don't know if I've mentioned that on the pod. He's absolutely a prodigy. And I just want to thank you for those Catholic socks.
Has he been to church yet?
He has not been to church yet. He couldn't handle that.
No?
No.
When do babies usually go to church?
Well, it depends. Do they care about going to purgatory?
Well, I mean, I knew the catechism by the time I was 1. So,
Really? So if I asked you today what the Immaculate Conception is, you know what that is.
Yes, I do. That's how I was born, my mom told me.
So what is the Immaculate Conception in the Catholic Catechism?
The Immaculate Conception is when Mary was conceived.
Oh,
wow.
You nailed it.
I know.
Listeners will recognize this is a flub Ryan made on air probably about a year ago.
I learn. I do learn.
I'm amazed that you actually retained that.
Yeah. I almost got it right. I was like, wait a minute. He's trying to trick me here, folks. Using the Virgin Mary to trick me again.
Judy, I think it's time to put a pair of Catholic socks just a little bigger in for my co-host here, Ryan J. He absolutely deserved it. Got the Immaculate Conception right on the dot. And
well, I'm looking forward to seeing these little socks on those little feet.
Absolutely. And Ryan, I think it's important. It's just essential that we put on our travel socks because it's time to take off so we can get to the topic of the day: industrial eyesores that are made into parks.
Flight attendants?
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan. So today we're talking about this trend. Have you noticed this is a trend? It's definitely something that I feel like I'm seeing more and more in my travels.
Yeah, well, I think as automation, closes their factories, we gotta do something with them, right?
Yeah,
it's Andrew Yang's plan.
Every point. The question is it? Do you think it's actually cheaper to like refurbish one of these things into a park versus just starting anew, just tearing it down, starting anew?
I don't know that it's cheaper, but it gives you a sense of gravity and history, and things happen here.
That's true. And I must say, these are some of my favorite parks I've ever been to. I think there's just a certain ambiance that makes it very interesting. A park, you look around and there's trees. Here, you got like giant hulking pieces of metal.
Right. No. You got like a massive metal thing that used to create something, and now kids are hanging on it,
Yeah, I know many of these parks that I've been to have signs that are like the industrial pieces are just for looking, not for playing. But like, come on. If you're a kid, you're definitely going to play on it.
The industrial pieces are most definitely for playing. So this is a phenomenon that seems to have begun in the 1970s. With simultaneous projects happening in Germany, including this massive Imscher landscape park, which is a 50-mile long stretch of land with over 100 different projects. So, the Germans are giving a lot of credit for coming up with these sort of new ways to remake industrial land.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think probably the most famous one today is the first one we're going to talk about, which is New York's High Line, right?
Yeah, I think that is has become sort of a worldwide sensation, right? I mean, when it first opened, and even now when you go to the High Line, if you go at any kind of like peak time, it is just jam-packed.
And so for those who haven't been to it in New York, this is a 1.5 mile long elevated rail line that's along the west side. And it goes through Chelsea, through the meatpacking district, and now ends by the brand new development Hudson Yards, which is my favorite place in New York, but which is a fine place to see some decent public art and new architecture.
There's a lot that I love about the High Line. One of them is that it basically dumps you off at the Whitney.
Yes, that's right. That's its lower end.
Yeah, and then at the upper end, you've got the Hudson Yards, which I think is probably the worst part of the High Line.
Yes.
I'm not a huge fan of Hudson Yards myself. But it's quite funny. In 2014, de Blasio said that he had never actually been to the High Line.
Oh, brother.
I know.
How did this man become mayor?
I don't know, but he has now been, as of 2017, he took time in his incredibly busy schedule in Des Moines to swing by the High Line.
Yeah, I mean, when you and I, this elevated line, this railway line, was considered a real eyesore in the neighborhood when it stopped being used and was basically abandoned in the 80s. But then it was actually a community group that rose up, and I believe there were a few celebrities too that were raising their voices, saying this is something that shouldn't be destroyed, but that could actually be turned into sort of another world icon for New York. And that outcry started in about 2006. And then over a decade, it was opening in segments. So the first piece opened in 2009, the second in 2011, and then finally in 2014 opened up this full 1.5 mile stretch.
And one of the you walk by a lot of really beautiful architecture. You mentioned that one of the buildings is the Zaha Hadid building.
Oh,
do you know this building?
Uh-huh.
And this is absolutely incredibly gorgeous building that many celebrities, including Ariana Grande, actually live at. So you actually get to walk by so close you can see in some of the apartments as you stroll by.
Not just some, I mean, many apartments. And the High Line actually goes directly under the Standard Hotel,
Yes.
which famously is popular among exhibitionists because you can be in your hotel room and just throw the curtains open and you have just a parade of folks underneath you at all hours of the day peering in and taking in whatever you're doing. I know I personally have seen several nude bodies through those windows.
Do you think that that's something they put in like the hotels.com listing? It's like flat, perfect room to flash the High Line, as you dress in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe it's not in the official marketing material, but I am 100% sure that there are.
It's in the Secret New York book.
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
Secret New York book, and it's definitely known among the nudist community. I'm 100% sure of that.
Wait, okay. Well, I kind of want to unpack how you know of anything if it's known among the nudist community. I think you are never nude. I believe, right?
I have friends who enjoy who have certain proclivities.
I cannot. I find that really hard to believe. So, coming from a person who wears a full bodysuit when they go to the pool.
That is a natty 1920s male bathing suit.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's very nice.
So for anyone that hasn't been on the High Line, it is quite a novel experience to be kind of elevated the traffic and hubbub of the New York city streets. But what makes it especially interesting is that they have preserved some of the rail tracks on the bridge, and they plant all different sorts of landscape architecture all along the walk and welcome rotating artists to bring in works of public art.
Yeah, you've always got some really interesting works of public art. You've got food. You've got kind of strange performances happening. You've got places where you can kind of sit and watch the traffic. Obviously, there's a million people taking Instagrams. But they have lots of spaces where you can sort of step off of the railway and kind of take in the city around you while people are rushing by.
And so for anyone who's heading to New York, the High Line should absolutely be on the top 5, top 10 list if you have not taken it in.
Oh, I would say top 5.
All right.
Yeah. No, it's actually one of the few things that I know that when somebody visits New York these days, if they haven't been, everyone likes it.
That's true.
There's not a lot of detractors. If you,
the only thing, it can get a tiny bit crowded.
Well, that's why you have to take them at off hours. Like I said, if you go at 5 o'clock on a Friday, it's like you're trying to get into a Yankees game or something. Right. Not that I've ever done that, but I imagine it's busy.
We believe that is something.
It's like trying to get into Hamilton on Lynn's last night.
Okay. Yeah. That I totally understood. Thanks. Yeah. And and if you love the High Line, you've been there before. There's a community group that is the one that oversees and takes care of it.
Friends of the High Line.
Friends of the High Line, exactly. Yeah. So we will link to them in the show notes.
And there's a similar group that is working to take an abandoned train station in Brooklyn and in Brooklyn near sort of Dumbo and create what they call the low line because it would mostly be underground. So really hopeful for projects like this in the future.
Yeah, I've wanted to talk to those low line folks. It's very neat. They've got ideas around piping in sunlight below ground and growing fungi. It could be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think until Bloomberg's son becomes mayor to actually be built, but does Bloomberg have a son?
Certainly won't be doing it.
No.
But Ryan, the number 2 one I want to talk about, it takes us far from New York, but it is extremely tied to that High Line project. Now, I mentioned that the High Line started it started gaining momentum around 2006. It was inspired by a very beautiful park set on an elevated rail in Paris. It's interesting because as folks who live in New York, the High Line I feel like when it came out, everybody was saying about how new it was. But as it turns out, they've had this in Paris since 1993. It's called the Promenade Plantee, very similar to the High Line, but it has a kind of a more classic, rather than big steel rails, it's these sort of beautiful sweeping brick arches. You can actually pick it up at the Bastille, and it goes for 3 miles.
3 miles is a pretty good run. That's like double the High Line.
Double the High Line. So when you really think, I mean, it is a very significant walk. I remember I did it on quite a hot day, and I was extremely moist by the end of it.
Yeah. Well, no, it is fair that Europe should have kind of started this because they do have a lot of like industrial wastelands over there. So
And one thing that I really like about it is that, unlike the High Line, where just below you continue to be the city streets in New York, in Paris, these beautiful brick arches have actually become home to a lot of artisan shops. So you have like jewelry makers and furniture makers and local artists who have taken up residence in what used to be kind of wasted spaces and have become really neat places to try to get that great souvenir.
that that is good to know. The High Line has sort of there used to be nothing on that avenue that was below the High Line, and now there's a lot of little restaurants and stuff have popped up too. So I think that is something that when you bring a lot of people, all of a sudden there's going to be more opportunity for commerce. And,
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
And the real estate prices have gone way up right along the High Line. Even though I don't really understand that because you got people looking at you all day long.
well, as we discussed earlier, some of your friends are into that.
And I will say, Ryan, the landscape architecture along the promenade in Paris, I think may even be a little better curated than that in High Line. I remember particularly there's areas where they put sort of trellises above you as you walk, and they have kind of beautiful hanging plants, and they have water features and ponds all along the way. And then there's also the added bonus in Paris, unlike in New York. When you're walking the High Line in New York, you have very high buildings on either side of you. And so you can occasionally feel kind of boxed in. It's different in Paris because the buildings tend to be a lot lower. So I recall you really get great views of kind of beautiful roofs, awesome kind of chimney scenes. It reminded me a bit of like Mary Poppins when they get above the buildings and you can see the chimney pots all along the top. And you can really see kind of old Paris when you're walking the promenade. So, elevated rail lines is kind of one category that we've established in New York and Paris. Ryan, why don't you tell us about number 3, Domino Park?
Sure. So Domino Park is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's brand new. It just opened last year. And they converted the old Domino sugar factory, which had been there since the 1800s, into this astonishing park that actually borders the East River. And it has a lot of areas to sort of sit and relax and hang out. There's beach volleyball where they've actually kind of built a fake beach there. They've built like this walkway that sort of walks up, and you can sort of walk around the sort of sides of the park. And it's really visually stunning, very green, and there's some lovely tacos at a taco stand available there. And there was sort of a lack of parks in that side of Brooklyn when it opened. There are definitely parks like deeper into Williamsburg. So this public space, I think the second it opened, people really flocked to it because there just isn't a whole lot out there to sort of enjoy the community.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is they sort of built the park around the industrial elements that were left from the Domino factory, including the syrup collection tanks, which probably are my favorite attraction in the park.
Yeah, the syrup collection tanks are massive and are really fun to look at. There's also other sections of the other big industrial machines that have been left, although you're not supposed to play on those. But there are these massive drill bits that are also on the property. So they definitely kept a lot of the spirit of the Domino factory alive.
And as you said, you're not supposed to play on those real industrial bits. But what's very interesting is that the designer of the playground for children actually drew inspiration from the sugar making process. So he told the New York Times, across the 3 different sections of the playground, it is meant to mimic the refining process. So the kids enter as raw sugar cane and exit as molasses or sugar cubes. I love that.
It does say how far we've come. That probably children worked at this sugar factory, and now they get to play there. You know,
I think there's a little bit of Willy Wonka in there.
Oh, and one other thing I really like about the Domino factory is the fog bridge, and it's one of the park has a couple like a sort of more traditional water fountain, but then they have this bridge that you walk through. And this is sort of near those syrup tanks that you were talking about, where there's just a tremendous amount of steam that's released. But it's like nice, clean steam. Because usually in New York, if you're walking somewhere,
no, you don't want to get in that steam,
and there's some steam, it's like this is horrible. But not at the fog bridge because it's like the only clean steam in the city. So
exactly,
outside of those bathhouses we covered before, a lot of clean steam there.
So if you're looking for a sweet time in New York, Oh, the face you made, Ryan.
Unbelievable.
It was like you had
Unbelievable.
it was like you had bitten into a lemon.
I mean, the guy has been a dad for like 4 weeks, and already.
I took to it like a pig to slop. You should check out that Domino factory in Williamsburg, and God knows there's very little else to recommend Williamsburg to you.
Ooh.
No, you're in Bushwick. You should hate Williamsburg.
No, we're brothers.
You know what?
We're
Go to
siblings.
Williamsburg for the Domino Park. Stay for the measles.
Oh wow. Okay. We should fly across the country right now, real quick. We've given New York enough love.
All right, Ryan. What you're referencing is number 4. This is a park that is true to my own heart. I visited it on that recent Pacific Northwest trip that I took, and I was in Seattle, and I read about this great and interesting park called Gasworks Park, and I kind of hit the nail on the head calling it Gasworks Park, and it's in a neighborhood in Seattle called Wallingford, which I knew it just spoke to me. Do you know why?
Because you're from Wallingford, Connecticut?
That's exactly right. My hometown was named Wallingford, and I was thrilled to find yet another in a city that I love. Seattle is it's my spiritual home. I love Seattle. And it turns out that they have this great park called Gasworks Park that is one of the hottest places to go in the city now. It's out on...
hot like because of all the gas that's burning, or hot because it's like popular?
hot because it's popular.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, Ryan, as with so many things, our friends in the Pacific Northwest were far ahead when it came to, reuse, recycling.
Right.
And, we talked about that the Promenade in Paris was opened in 1993. This actually is a gasworks. It's the only remaining coal gasification plant in the United States. And Seattle actually bought it in 1962 with the idea of turning it into a park.
And Donald Trump's going to turn it back into a gas coal facility.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, I forgot to. I figured we'd close with that we're pressing reverse. They just have to put the switch right back on. It comes right back into being.
Yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things about preserving these great factories.
You can turn them back into factories with the flip of a switch, folks.
And while it was bought in 1962, it opened to the public in 1975. So it's amazing when you go to think that it still remains so popular. And I do hope that, decades from now, the High Line will still be attracting people in the same way, because these places are so novel. They have such character that I think that's what really suggests that more cities should be making these industrial parks.
So this architect, Richard Hogg, he came up with this idea. Most of the other city planners had expected to destroy these refinery towers, but he was like, no, I think we can keep it and I can use it in my design. But he had to actually convince the local government, that he could do it safely, because they were worried about all the soil having contaminants.
Mm-hmm.
So his design had to incorporate something called bioremediation.
Oh, yes, sure.
Good old-fashioned bioremediation to detoxify and get all those chemicals out of the soil. So, because this was such a new idea, he was like, we're going to use this land for something else. And people were like, no, we just put a fence around it. This is America.
Right. Just let it sink into the sea.
We just let it sink into the sea. And so he had to actually sort of say, no, there's going to be a process for this. So,
and now, of course, detoxification, that's sort of the founding principle of goop.
Anyways, shout out to Richard Hogg, who was a big thinker in this sort of landscape design.
Yeah, and just to give you a sense of what it's like inside the park, there is an artificial hill that makes for a great climb, and you have lots of people picnicking there, and that overlooks the old gasification plant. And what they've done is they have actually, Ryan, in that true American spirit, just kind of put up a fence all along these pipelines and these chimneys, and it has those fun kind of interweaving pipelines, and they've been left to rust and go back to the elements. But then there's a separate park that's sort of a barn-like structure. That's actually it was the plant's old exhauster compressor building, and they basically shut off the equipment, but they repainted it. And it is a place where kids can play and get close to the machinery to kind of appreciate this industrial past.
I love that. As long as it can still become part of the industrial past, I think that's good.
I will say, I recall when I was there are signs that you're not allowed to climb on the equipment, but the bright colors of it just suggest that despite the jagged edges, you absolutely should be climbing this.
Well, it's Seattle, so it's they don't mind a little jagged edges now and again.
What's that mean?
It's grungy. It's a grungy and a cool town.
It's not a grungy. I get it used to be grungy. Now Amazon owns it.
I guess that's true.
Soon enough, this will just be like a drone plant. So Ryan, from Seattle, I actually want to. It's getting a little cold up here. I would suggest that we go way down south to one of my favorite cities, New Orleans.
Oh, I would love to head down to the Crescent City.
How I said it like a local? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. New Orleans.
And New Orleans has Crescent Park. And Crescent Park is very interesting because what it did was it took the remains of a wharf right along the Mississippi River and converted that into a park. So what's very neat about Crescent Park is that it embraces that maritime history that could have been easy to kind of knock down to clear the way for big open lawns. But instead, they built it all along the side of the Mississippi, meaning that it had to incorporate a number of different wharves, different rusted out structures that look like old warehouses. And it even has a beautiful sort of iconic crescent-shaped bridge that allows pedestrians to go from one side of railroad track lines that runs right through the park. And Ryan, I've read a fair amount of architectural, criticism and commentary on this park particularly. And what they really like is that many of the buildings are down to just the scaffolding and pillars that used to hold them. And I particularly liked this description. It's from an article that I'll link to in the show notes, where they said, the shadows and architectural severity lend the park a certain existential quality. The monumental burned skeleton of an adjacent wharf remains picturesquely in place at the waterline. And I think that's what I like about this atmospheric park so much, is that you can look out to the kind of uninterrupted waterfront, the mighty Mississippi flowing by, and you can kind of take your leisurely time taking it in, but then you can turn the other way and kind of see the destruction, the kind of industrial past that has been preserved but allowed to decay.
That's actually one of the things I was reading about in the German park, was that they allowed for, one of the things they allowed for was for flowers and for natural sort of growth to just sort of overtake parts of it. And that became sort of part of the beauty and the charm of it, right? So it feels like it's kind of overgrowing at the same time that it's actually kind of contained and kept in check.
I'm looking forward to tracking on the podcast other cities that are looking at sort of the industrial holdouts, the factories that are closing, the gas works, all these types of industrial remnants, and how they can turn them into useful public spaces.
Yeah, in fact, if you out there have a favorite industrial park in your neck of the woods, reach out to us and let us know, because we'd love to cover some of these in a future recalculating.
And just to run them down, I'll put up links to all of the 5 we talked about in the show notes. But today we talked about New York's High Line, the Paris Promenade Plantee, which was the inspiration of the High Line, Domino Park in New York City, which is a relatively new park, Seattle's Gas Works Park, the oldest that we talked about, and finally, New Orleans Crescent Park, which really captures a certain spirit and story of New Orleans.
I think with all those industrial spaces, I think it's time for us to hit the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Kiernan, what is the last stop?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Ryan. Listen, we are here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show. It's the final segment of the show. There's no more segments of the show past
It's the best segment of the show.
It is voted most popular among our listeners. It's your favorite segment, my favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People segment. And it is the time, the place where you and I each share one thing that we read or we did. Maybe we cooked it, maybe we bought it, something that fed the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. Because, you can't always be out on the road traveling, but it's important to always be feeding the spirit of wanderlust. So, Ryan, did you, Ryan, bring Last Stop this week?
I did. So I was in DC recently, and I was looking for new public spaces that I hadn't visited yet, because DC has a ton of great public spaces, great museums. And I found this park called Meridian Hill Park. Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't. I've never even heard of it.
So this is Meridian Hill Park is located in Columbia Heights, and it is this. It's a park that was constructed as beginning in 1912. So it definitely has like a really kind of run down vibe. but it feels like it is much older than that. It's sort of when you're walking around it feels like you're in a place that's been there for a very, very long time. Because it's both lovely and sort of like I don't know, lovingly run down, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's
how I describe you to people.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It's but it's got this massive 13 basin cascading fountain that goes down sort of the center of the park, where a lot of folks are taking Instagrams. It's a lovely place to walk around. They have a statue of my one of my favorite presidents, James Buchanan. The only gay president. So
that is what people think. Yes.
Right. So it's nice that he has a Gay Men Love Park. So it's a great place for him to spend his final days. And it's the only memorial to James Buchanan in all of Washington, D.C. So if you want to see James Buchanan, you're going to have to go to Meridian Hill Park. It was actually named Meridian Hill Park because Thomas Jefferson had a geographic marker placed on the hill, which is directly north of the White House, and it was supposed to help track the White House meridian. So Thomas Jefferson placed this there, and it sat there for like a long time, and then it took like 100 or so years before people were like, maybe we should make this into a park. There was a woman who wanted to build a giant castle there as like a presidential castle. That idea didn't go over too well.
I like that idea.
It would have been fun. When that failed, she was like, okay, maybe a park. And then finally given the go-ahead in 1900 to build that park.
Wow, castle to park.
It has, it does feel, because it's a little run down, it's much different than sort of the gleamy DC that you usually see when you're looking at in the public spaces, when you're walking in the National Mall, when you're going to the monuments. It feels lived in, and it's sort of a lovely space.
I love it, and I will definitely make my way there next time I'm in DC. And that way, I could be one of the few people to take my picture with both James Buchanan statues, the one in Rapid City, South Dakota, my favorite presidential city, and then in DC.
And lastly, Kieran, you're like this. 1994, Meridian Hill Park became a National Historic Landmark.
I do like that very much.
Yeah, so there you go. So, Kieran, do you have a last stop?
Do I have a last stop? I mean, really, I was tempted to put this up top, Ryan. I am happy to say that, do you know Planet Money?
Oh, I love Planet Money.
Yeah, Planet Money, great podcast. They have
they're almost as successful at podcasting as we are.
Almost. And they have a spin-off podcast called The Indicator, where they tell similar type stories, but usually much more collapsed, quicker format. And I am happy to say that The Indicator did a great podcast all about the rise and fall of WOW Airlines.
The rise and fall and rise?
Whether they tackle the new rise, you'll have to check out for yourself. I will put a link to it in the show notes. But what I will say I found most interesting, you and I have investigated a lot about WOW Airlines.
Yeah, I would think we would do the definitive sort of history of WOW, but it's too late now.
The historical piece that they talk about and the role. Do you remember when the volcano exploded in Iceland, grounding planes in America and in Europe? You couldn't fly across the airspace near Iceland.
I most definitely remember that. That was a very wild thing that happened.
They talk about how it was actually that happening that really sent WOW Airlines into its high-flying economic success. So if you want some interesting context and history on WOW, or if we haven't fed that enough, do check out The Indicator, where you're gonna get the connection both of its rise and why the economy of Iceland is so closely tied to the success of this airline, which makes me very happy that it's coming back.
Wow.
So Ryan, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, we're going to have my friend Bao Ung, who is the food and drink editor at Time Out New York, come on to talk about what makes a great restaurant and some of his favorite restaurants in New York and beyond. So that's going to be a really exciting interview, and we'll have that next week.
And it's not going to be just a New York specific episode, right? It's going to be broadly about what makes a great restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. No, I want to hear from Bao what he thinks makes a great restaurant, and this is something that's universal, and then maybe he'll share some of his favorites.
Fantastic.
All right, well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Oof.
So Ryan, what kind of factory would you like to save by making a park around it?
I think it would be really fun to save, maybe make a mannequin factory, because
that would be a creepy
Yeah, that would be really shocking.
Imagine the haunted park around Halloween that you could create in that.
Oh my God,
fantastic!
Yeah. You know I love haunted houses. So
all
that
right,
would be
Mannequin Park. We're gonna have to start doing some research where all those mannequins come from.
I want to call it Mannequin City, but that's fine. Yeah.
Mannequin City.